Here's a highlight from today's podcast.
To go back to your question, these are man-made frequencies that are not natural, that are completely different from the frequencies, the natural frequencies in nature, and they are biologically disruptive.
That's my guest on today's podcast, Camilla Rees, as she discusses electromagnetic frequencies, or EMFs, as they are more commonly known. Camilla is an award-winning health and environmental activist. Since suffering an EMF radiation injury 12 years ago, she has dedicated her life to raising awareness about the biological and health effects of electromagnetic fields from wireless technology and infrastructure. She's since started 2 nonprofits and is one of the leading voices on this important and little understood public health issue. Thanks for tuning in to the Healthy Heathen podcast, and if you like the content, please subscribe and share. Grounded in the art and science of medicine, this podcast will help you to acquire knowledge, distill wisdom, and tune in to intuition, offering practical solutions to the complicated health questions that plague our modern times. While the medical model is broken and the conventions we have long held as true are crumbling, how do we make sense of it all? It starts one conversation at a time. Welcome to the Healthy Heathen podcast. All right. Thank you, Camilla, for joining us here today. I'm really happy that you came, and I'm excited to hear you tell us about your work with EMFs and to learn a little bit from you today.
Well, thank you. It's really nice to be here too, and I'm grateful to you for bringing this subject out to your audience.
Cool. Thank you. So how did you get involved with this subject of EMFs? Like maybe just start from the beginning, as I know it's become a bit more of a popular topic now, but you've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah, it was, about 12 years ago, and I was living in an apartment and in San Francisco, and I started getting dizzy, and I noticed that I was having trouble getting things done. I was extremely fatigued. When I would lie on my bed, I would notice that I'd get like heart irregularities. I'd never had something like that before. My vision changed. And the strange thing was that as soon as I left the apartment, I was all right.
Oh.
And so I observed this over the course of a couple months. And I realized eventually that I was in grave danger, that there was something that was making me very ill. And the symptoms were getting worse, and I ended up moving out and tried to figure it out. I eventually found out that a new neighbor had moved in, and they put a wireless router on the other side of the wall from my pillow. So for 2 or 3 months, I had a blasting, a router blasting at my brain, and and so I figured it out, thankfully, because back then nobody knew much about this subject. I mean, I didn't even know who to turn to then. There weren't doctors that were aware of this subject. It was very, very new. And so that's
how exactly did you become aware that it was this router? You talked to the neighbor? Is that what happened?
I had studied a lot of health and medicine for a long, long time, and I knew what it wasn't. I had ruled out. I was able to determine that it wasn't me, and that it was something else. And so I remember attending a conference of Dear Chick Klinghart's, a medical conference years before, where somebody was speaking about electromagnetic fields. And I remember at the time thinking, well, that's the strangest thing. It was a little boy or a teenage boy who was affected by radio frequency radiation, same kind of radiation, but from a radio tower on a hill in Seattle. And I remember thinking, well, that's just, where I live at that time. I was on the East Coast. We didn't have hills like that. That'll never happen to me. But I remembered it when I was trying to crack this case. And so I got online and I found a group of scientists focused on the topic and asked, could somebody tell me, how do I measure? And so one of the scientists said they were coming to the Bay Area the next week, brought a meter, and we figured out that it was on the other side of the wall. And I knocked on the neighbor's door, and yes, it was the case, but there was no legal precedent. I didn't have any right to tell them they couldn't put a router there. Right. And so I packed up my things and moved. And I needed to repair my health. I was very, very, very impaired. And I felt really in grave danger. And so it took me, I left, I went someplace else for a couple months and chilled out. And then I eventually went to Optimum Health Institute and really pushed on the health front, doing the raw food, wheatgrass juice, living, a high vitality life, with living foods and exercise and lots of sunshine. And it took at least a year before I felt fully better. And so this was a different situation than what a lot of people have, because it was a massive close up, fairly short term, couple month exposure. But these same symptoms that I got suddenly are what people are getting slowly over time from just much more mild exposures, where they have to go to work in a school or an office building that has Wi-Fi, or they don't know better and they have Wi-Fi on at home, and they've got all kinds of headaches and sleep problems and fatigue and don't figure it out. So the many millions of people are getting these kind of symptoms slowly from the accumulation of exposures from cell phones, wireless routers, smart meters, or utility meters on people's homes, all these new devices, even televisions that have embedded antennas in them today. And now the going up of these antennas every couple utility poles in our neighborhoods, and soon to come Wi-Fi being beamed from space, from satellites that are going up for this purpose. So we're on a trajectory that is extremely unwise, and that is going to kill us eventually if we don't stop this nonstop proliferation of electromagnetic fields. So I learned about it personally. I woke up, I read the science, I started meeting the scientists, I started putting on programs, and been, active on the subject for 12 years. And now many, many more groups have started, hundreds of them in the U.S. alone, and many people internationally are now focused on this. So that's the brief history and how I got involved.
Now, can you say a little bit more about how you transformed from this being a personal issue to an issue of activism for yourself?
Well, all I knew at the time was this was really important. And so I dropped everything, and I thought, okay, all these scientists need to know how to do is to communicate in a way that the world can hear. And I thought it would take a year, and I was willing to give a year of my time pro bono, and because it was that important. And I dropped everything else. And so, but I slowly realized that there was, there was another side here. There was the industry that was putting out all this propaganda of how great this technology is, and how better it is, and how the truth is that it's an inferior technology to hardwired internet communications in speed, in security, privacy, safety, many different areas. We have a big monster to fight. And so I decided, well, I'm just one person. All I can do is start to learn and start to communicate, and everybody can do that. I started reading the science. That at first I started putting on programs where I would feature the experts on this topic, on different aspects of the topic. And then I became expert in it myself and started speaking all over the place, and at medical conferences and all kinds of business settings, and educating. So I became an educator, health educator on the topic, and also was ultimately involved in publishing a study on the heart effects from electromagnetic fields. But I'm just like, I'm doing what anybody can do. They can learn and share it with who will listen. And everybody's got friends, family, community, and potentially city council members and whoever. But, we have to exercise our ability to support the democratic process and get involved, get engaged. I have never been engaged in a public health or any other kind of issue publicly before, but this I there was no choice. There was no other ethical step for me to take, knowing what I had learned.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thanks for doing that. What can you just back up for our listeners that might not know anything about EMFs and just sort of explain what is an EMF and what are, you've already mentioned a lot of the major exposures, but, where do they come from? Going back to, the age of electricity, I suppose.
Sure. Well, we'll go back even further, actually, because natural electromagnetic fields are in nature. There's a constant communications happening throughout all of life in nature. It happens through water molecules, actually, and it's a natural, subtle frequencies. And so then mankind came along and started making man-made artificial electromagnetic fields that were stronger and greater intensity, and playing around with that. And so that, radar was maybe the first thing, and then it went on, supported by military interests and industrial interests in use of electromagnetic fields. And so eventually, these frequencies were starting to be used for the consumer products. And so, with the first cell phone, and remember, it looked like a shoebox, and and then eventually we had wireless and internet access, and now we've got a cell phone. A smartphone has not just a cellular antenna, but it's got multiple antennas, like 3-4 antennas on it, for different purposes, for the wireless, for the Bluetooth, so it's very complex, and they've made an enormous $1 trillion industry out of this, and think that it's cool. I guess it is kind of cool that you can do things without wires, but we know nobody's looking at the safety risks from wired versus wireless. And wired, anytime that you can wire a connection to the internet, like in your home, you should use an Ethernet cord, plug it into your computer and plug it into the router, and make sure the router is either a hardwired only router or set on the wireless or the wired only setting. And every time at every opportunity, we should hardwire, and because it's hard to avoid these exposures out and about, but your home is your sanctuary, and it's where you do have control. And I want you to know that I have a 0 on the meter. You can buy these meters to measure the frequencies. I have 0. I had 0 for a long time here where I am now, but then a neighbor moved in here, a different location, years later, and put in two wireless routers on the other side of the wall. And I couldn't believe this was happening to me again. Same kind of symptoms, couldn't tolerate it. Finally, I tried to talk to him and say, would you hardwire? And I would pay for it, and he wouldn't hear anything of it, and diminished me. And I finally said, well, look, I've gone through this before. I know what I can do. I know that I can solve it on my side of the wall by shielding on my side of the wall. But I'm just warning you that if I do that it's going to make the situation far worse for you, because it's going to reflect back into your premises. That he didn't want to hear. So I ended up having to shield one whole side of where I live and got it back down to 0 on the meter. So anyway, these are man-made to go back to your question, these are man-made frequencies that are not natural, that are completely different from the frequencies, the natural frequencies in nature. And they are biologically disruptive. They are energy. Think of an electromagnetic field as packets of energy that when they come up against your body, you're comprised of all these different regulation systems, mostly known as the nervous system, but actually it's beyond that, as the Chinese medicine knows. But we have a regulation system that keeps everything in balance. And when you have an outside force, or an inside force, they say, if you're under a lot of stress, for example, but if you have an outside force that's an energy force that is scrambling that communications in your body, you could get any number of symptoms. And that's what's happening. People are getting headaches, fatigue, dizziness, um, clumsiness.
Isn't insomnia part of it too?
Insomnia is extremely common, and it's one of the easiest things to address. All you need to do is turn off the router at night and notice the difference. I mean, I can't tell you how many people where I've helped going into their home and where they had insomnia for years. And I figured out the level of the electromagnetic fields using a meter and showed them if they turned off the router, it went to 0. And that was like an eye-opening. And I said, why don't you try tonight? Just unplug your router and see if you don't sleep better. And in every single case, people sleep like a baby for the first time in years. So at a minimum, people should make sure that router goes off at night. You could some of them you can put on a plant light timer so that you only have to think about it once, and you know that every night at X hour that it'll be off and it'll be turned back on when you set it. Or better yet is to hardwire and not have to ever have the wireless on. And if you do have the wireless on,
I was going to say, isn't distance your friend?
I'm sorry?
Isn't distance your friend when it comes to the Wi? If you have to have it on, like keeping it as far.
Yes, and no. Yes, your distance creates. You're exposed to less of the power, but you're still exposed to the frequencies, and there is some evidence that there are paradoxical effects that for certain types of effects, like brain neuron damage, that the lower the power, in other words, the frequencies without that close-up power source, the lower the greater the incidence of these things. So none of it is good, for close up or far away. Mm-hmm. I really can't. I mean, it might help you not notice the symptoms. You might not feel a heart irregularity or feel as much of a brain irregularity, difficulty with cognitive functions, but you still, your body's still being affected by, the lower power exposures. So it's important.
So it's good to think about it like as a pollution in your home. You wouldn't really want any pollution in your home.
That's right, and we don't have to.
Keeping it further away doesn't necessarily make it, and maybe lessens it a little bit, but it's still not good.
The best solution is to keep it off, and if you can turn it off. If you one level of remediation would be turn it off every night, so that during the night when your body needs to rest and repair, it is not being bombarded by these frequencies and has a better chance of repairing itself. So that would be number one. Number two would be, if you really think that you can't hardwire everything right away, there is a router that's made in the Netherlands. It's called JRS Eco Router. And this router is able to, it has some software added to it that filters out like 90% or more of the exposure. So it dramatically lowers your exposure, and yet you still have the wireless capability. Okay. And that also has the ability to put a timer on it. There's nothing like that yet in the US that I'm aware of. And then the best thing to do is to just simply hardwire everything. You're going to feel better. You're not going to age as fast, Seriously. This stuff is eroding our biology. It's creating, more oxidation and all kinds of different biological changes at the cellular and DNA level, and impairing DNA repair, and with regard to what you mentioned, sleep, it depletes melatonin, and which helps you sleep, and it also is one of the most important things for cancer prevention, melatonin. So, safety. Why not? If you can be safe, why wouldn't you want to? In your own home, that's where we need to start. and then start getting activated about what's happening in our neighborhoods, because it's quite urgent. We need more and more people to become educated and start speaking up, because otherwise it's going to be hard to reverse this once they put antennas, an antenna right in front of your house or your apartment building.
So getting back to the average person and what they can do in their home, so it sounds like the Wi-Fi router is the main source inside the home of these EMFs.
Well, you got the cell phone too. You got the cell phone. So I own a cell phone, but I don't use it. I have it for when I travel. I haven't turned it on in a couple of months, for example, because we're not traveling because of COVID. But I take it with me when I travel, and I use it for my outgoing convenience when I need to make a call, and I do it on a speakerphone. So that's how I use the cell phone. When you turn on, let's say you've shielded your you've measured your home, you know where the exposures are, and you've taken steps to, hardwire your home, and then let's say you learn that you are also being exposed by some router from your neighbor that's coming over into your house, going right through the wall. There are ways that you can shield. There are shielding fabrics for curtains, curtain liners, or just curtains. There are shielding paints that you can put on the wall. And there are shielding industrial quality aluminum, rolls of industrial quality aluminum that can be staple gunned up on a wall. It needs to be completely done, whether it's paint or fabric or aluminum.
Are there metals that would block it, or is it just aluminum? Or
no, there are definitely. In some of the fabrics, there's copper and there are other metals. But for example, just your average old aluminum doesn't work. And I've tested them at Home Depot and REI and places like that. The Mylar aluminum, most of it doesn't work. Some of it does, the Mylar, but most of it does not. So you really need to know. And the best is the aluminum industrial quality. You can get it from Safe Living Technologies in Canada. They're a very good, highly experienced vendor of these kinds of things. And they also go into people's homes and do remediations as needed. But, it works. I've done it myself. So, the paints, the problem with the paints is that while they work very well, if you don't own your premises and you eventually have to, take it off, say, it really goes into the wall and it's very hard to get off. So you have to really be sure. And then also once you paint, let's say you paint one side of your house, because that's where the exposure is coming from. Well, what happens if a year later somebody on the other side of the street or something comes in and there's an antenna on a telephone pole? All of a sudden, and let's say that's now coming into your premises from the other direction. Well, it's going to bounce off that aluminum or that reflective paint, and it's going to make it much worse in your premises. So you have to have the ability to take something off. Really wouldn't want to live there in those circumstances, but it will make it worse. I measured before and after I did my current place, and I turned it on.
You live in a city now, or do you?
No, I don't. I live in a very non-industrial, quiet town, and then there wasn't much going on here. But anyway, eventually a neighbor moved in, put in these routers, and it became a big problem. And so I measured an iPad with a meter before the aluminum was put up. And then after it was put up and it was 0 in the room, got it totally successfully remediated it. Then the iPad was turned on in the very same location and the meter reading was 3 times what it had been before. So the fact that there was aluminum amplified those effects by 3 times. So We
Oh, I see what
really
you're
have
saying.
to be smart.
You had a iPad in the room with you not on the other side of the wall with the illuminator.
Right.
So it was amplifying it by reflecting it.
That's right. And that's what people have to understand. Their cell phones will do the same thing. If they start remediating their home, that they have to understand that if they use any kind of radiating device in there or radiating equipment, sometimes they even are hiding
Yeah.
antennas in some of the routers that they're saying are hardwired. But you get a meter and you realize, no, they actually have a hidden antenna in there. A lot of new TVs have hidden antennas in there. People are getting sick. They can't figure it out. Well, you go around there and you figure out exactly where the antenna is in that TV. So we're moving into this era they call it the
Right.
Internet of Things, where they want everything. Somebody's fantasy is to have all these different devices connecting. So why? Does it add any value to you? No. It's because they can start collecting more data and profiling you and marketing and studying you. And this is private use information. It is a
Right.
huge privacy issue in all of this as well.
But what about for people that really need, to have a cell phone? Are there some tips that you can give people for how to manage the cell phone to make it less dangerous for them?
Well, why? Give me an example of why would somebody need a cell phone?
Let's say they work in the gig economy and they have to have a cell phone to, use the apps for their job.
Mm-hmm.
Or they're maybe in a place where they don't have internet access, so they use their phone, for the internet, which allows them to, do a lot of things that maybe are important.
Mm-hmm.
Applying for jobs, applying for unemployment. I mean, like all these things are online now.
Yeah, so I recommend that as much as possible be done on a hardwired computer, not on a mobile device. When you can do it on a hardwired computer, you should. If you really are out and about mobile and need to do something, like check if you have a job offer in the gig economy, then you turn it on and you turn it off. And you can also, when you're home, what some people do is they forward their phone to their landline phone. Or what a lot of parents are doing when children need to use iPads at home, and this also works for the cell phone, is that using two adapters, at least with the Apple, and I know you can do it with others as well. You can hardwire the connection to an iPad or a cell phone with the Ethernet cord.
Okay.
Parents are doing this so that their children can use the internet on their iPad and not have to have the exposures.
Actually, somebody was telling me that you could actually hardwire a cell phone now.
That's what I'm saying. You can do the same thing to your cell phone or an iPad. There are two adapters. There are plenty of videos actually on YouTube that will show you how to do this. I've done it. I know how to do it. And it definitely works. I know how to do it with Apple equipment, but I also know that there are other adapters for non-Apple equipment. So yeah, you can do that. It's a discipline.
There are a lot of people that live in rural areas where they actually don't have hardwired internet. So it's what they're relying on their phones to either hotspot a computer or just to use their phone as like access to the internet. And so I guess there's ways that you could just kind of like you were mentioning earlier that it has 3 or 4 different antenna. Would one strategy be like just shutting off the different antenna that you're not using, so that it's emitting less?
Absolutely. You want to keep it. I would say minimize the ways that people can access you to begin with. In other words, the texting, the Facebook, the WhatsApp, you want to minimize those options for people, so you're not constantly on those. You want to improve your whole attention, your ability to pay attention. So you got to look at ways to eliminate the fragmentation of your attention. You want to do things that are commit to doing monotasking and with deep concentration and doing things well and not multitasking. Mm-hmm. You want to keep the phone off or in airplane mode when it's not in use. Putting it in airplane mode can make a very big difference. You want to make sure that all of the antennas are off, though. Make sure that the other, the Bluetooth, everything's off. And then turn it on when you need it. But get in the habit of that. Don't have it tethered to you or right near you all day long, radiating you. You want to, every time you're allowing yourself to be distracted by the fragmentation that happens when, these devices, they've got everything on them that used to be done separately. You've got your to-do list, your calendar, your camera, your internet, like all these different functions are all on this one device. So we're like like rats, rushing to the device that I tell people, start to go back, take your to-do list back to a pad, get a camera, there are now these things that are called, there are a couple of brands of them, but one is called the Light Phone. The Light Phone, Lite. Light Phone only allows you to do a couple of speed dial numbers. It has access to, I think, one or two of the car services, like the Ubers of the world. And I can't remember, there were different models. But they limit your ability to use it as an entertainment device and to use it for anything that's non-essential. So I would look seriously into those.
Okay. That's a good tip there.
And then I would remove any commercial apps on the phone that you use, that are profiting from your attention.
Mm-hmm.
I
got off of some social media and got rid of that a little while ago. That's been freeing, which has been great.
Which did you get off of?
Facebook.
Facebook, good for you. Congratulations.
I never was really on the other one, so.
Yeah, that's great. That's good. I'm not quite there yet because I do have a group on this topic called Campaign for Radiation-Free Schools on Facebook, and we have thousands of members. And so I would love to get off of it, but there's a value in
well, I guess I should say I've greatly reduced it. I've actually done an interesting thing because I also have a few groups that I feel like are very important to be part of, and so it feels really useful in that way. But what I did was I actually took every person out of my feed, so I get no feed. So when I turn it on, there's no updates, which is the thing that I feel like was sucking all of my time and attention, and also alarming me and sending me into fight or flight when people were
fabulous.
Thinking. So I get on there and there's like a few things, that I've liked, like, maybe a Buddhist quote and then the groups that I just go there for on purpose. So I'm finding that it's just been wonderful doing it that way.
That's great.
But I don't have the app on my phone, so I have to be, at a computer and get online and kind of go there.
Mm-hmm. What I recommend to people is to really be strategic about use of technology instead of just letting it be, part of you. Set goals for every day and plan and get organized and make your life and your goals your main focus, and then use technology as a tool, but keep the goals and your purpose as in high priority, right in your sight, at all times, because otherwise these technologies will have us drift into all this learning, which of course is really interesting, all this entertainment, which of course is interesting, all this interacting with people who communicate with you, where there are no boundaries in with
true.
emails. Everybody feels that they can email you.
It's supremely designed to kind of keep you on it and keep you using it.
That's right. So we have to balance that out with goal setting and deciding what we're trying to create in our life. And like more than ever, we need to be focused on what we want and what steps we're going to take to get there. And we need to balance out all that other stuff. I don't know. I think that's the best way, is to constantly be reminding yourself. I keep lists in different places of what I'm trying to accomplish in different areas of my life. and reread them. It's crazy. It's that we have to do this. Because
a healthy lifestyle and mindset is really key to a healthy life. You can't just get off or use your phone less. I mean, it's like you have to really look at what's going on. If we're looking, a lot of people are very familiar with organic food now. It's made a lot of progress in the past 20 years, and we're feeding our kids organic food, but we're not thinking about what we're putting into our minds and into our bodies and who has our attention.
That's right.
These kind of lifestyle choices and questions that you bring up are essential. Because,
and I'll like to say one other thing on this that a lot of people don't talk about, and that is so important, is that in the old days when we didn't have all this distraction and we had space between our activities for our mind to go wherever it wanted, we would get intuition, instincts. Right. We would have things revealed to us, guidance. It's really quite amazing with the degree to which, like, from somewhere, you will remember, oh my gosh, I just left my credit card at that restaurant. That might come to you 10 minutes later, like, oh my gosh, okay. Our minds have the ability to travel to where they need to go to guide us. And we are they're thinking, the technology people are, trying to second guess our own minds and tell us what we might be interested in, and tell us who we might want to be a friend with, and they're overriding our own natural instincts, intuition, and connection to that bigger whole. It's the connection to the invisible dimension, where dreams happen, and it's a quantum fields. It's like they're assuming that doesn't matter, that connection doesn't matter, and that their reductionist analysis of our behaviors is going to be valuable to us, to suggest this to us or suggest that. The truth is, the most important and valuable thing to us is to connect us to ourselves and to that bigger whole. And we're getting the exact opposite. People are losing their ability to their intuition. And children, oh my gosh, what I hear from child psychologists is that the creativity in children is just flat. They kind of are like, stimulate me. They're looking for the next thing to be done to them, as opposed to the old days of childhood and using your imagination and getting, following their instincts. And, it's all insane, really, what's happening. And it needs to be reversed. And slowly but surely, people are waking up. And I think one good thing about this COVID pandemic is that and having more and more people having to be indoors on technology, is that these problems are becoming way more apparent to a much larger group of people.
Wow, that's interesting. And that's great. What you just said, all of that being connected basically to our higher purpose and higher power and our creativity. And, going for a walk in the woods or spending time at the beach is not something that, anyone is profiting off of. So yeah, they're discouraging that type of activities and keeping you online as much as possible. The whole internet is designed to keep you online.
That's right. So we're slaves. We've become slaves in a way.
And even knowing that, I sucked into it so many times.
Yeah, it's so powerful. Have you seen the new film called The Social Dilemma?
No, I'm kind of afraid to watch it because
it's really worthwhile. It's very encouraging because it's about a dozen or so tech exec entrepreneurs who were involved in the creation a lot of these technologies, Facebook and Google and WhatsApp, and who now are speaking out about what they understand now these technologies have done. And one guy, his name is Tristan Harris. He has a site called Time Well Spent, and another Center for Humane Technology. And he's been starting a nonprofit focused on this effort of raising awareness. Now, he doesn't touch the electromagnetic field issue, which is disappointing. But he is very focused on the addiction to these technologies, and he had developed a company that he sold to Google that was actually sometimes getting people addicted to like a exercise app, for example, might be considered a good thing,
Right.
I can't remember. He had some sort of good purpose to whatever, but he came out of the Stanford University, they call it persuasive design field, where they were teaching everybody how you can get more eyeball time. And now all these people, they're realizing what damage it's done. There's also another group called UCOT, UCOT, stands for Unintended Consequences of Technology, and it's run by another Silicon Valley entrepreneur named Chris Adegika, who puts on a conference regularly, bringing all these tech leaders together to discuss these issues. And so these are signs of hope, when the insiders start to focus on the issues.
Yeah, that is a real good sign of hope. Yeah, so I guess I'll have to check that out. The Social Dilemma, it's called, huh?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, well, it's an uphill battle when it comes to public health in general. Look at how long it took for tobacco to sort of be accepted as a health risk. So it's a long fight, and it sounds
the only thing with this, unfortunately, is that we don't have the time that we had with tobacco, because the rate of acceleration of use of these technologies, including from 100,000 satellites that are going to be going up into low orbit to beam Wi-Fi from space, this is going to be, I think, fatal for the planet, because nobody really understands that this radiation disrupts water communications, and it'll affect the clouds, and that water will rain down. It's going on the crops, and it won't be providing the kind of communicating water that the soil needs to be able to develop a healthy microbiome and to be able to create healthy food. And so it is predicted by those who understand this in the scientific world that it's going to dramatically impact food productivity, not to mention human health and health in the entire ecosystem, because it's affecting the water. And this is a brand new.
It does that because we have like this natural frequencies that the sun and the earth are just sort of basked in, right? And these satellites are going to basically interfere with it and put an artificial frequency around most of the earth. Is that what it is?
Well, yes, in a sense, it's that water molecules are. A recent science from Europe has shown that there is a communication system throughout water on the planet. Water molecule, it's like a natural internet. Then there's a 24/7 transmitting and receiving going on through all water molecules in our body, and water molecules between our body and the trees and the soil and the sun and the moon and the quantum fields. It's an orchestra of natural, subtle communications that for the first time has been able to be measured and documented by this team that I'm closely connected to. And it's a stabilizing force. That orchestra, if you will, is meant to be happening in our bodies and in the planetary ecosystems, and it is a stabilizing force. And there's an argument to be made that the disruption to water communications, whether it's from electromagnetic fields or chemicals, unnatural synthetic chemicals, is actually leading to global warming, the weather changes that we're seeing. And so if that is the case, which I think there's enough evidence that to show, then the idea of putting 100,000 satellites up and more antennas also through our neighborhoods, every few utility poles, this is like a game over kind of situation, I think. So
Right.
I am very actively focused on this and trying to find ways to bring serious attention to it, because I believe that it is critical.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds critical. Is there anything that we can leave with? Maybe on a little bit more of an upbeat note than that one?
Yeah, sure. What I would say is we know that technology takes away our attention, it's fragmenting us. So it's really important that we, and parents especially, guide their children to restore the natural rhythms, be outside in nature, be interacting with people, learn to be present, cultivate presence, cultivate longer attention spans, prioritize activities in your life that root you in community and at a human pace. We have power over this, and we have the ability to shape our lives and proactively work with these issues and work with the stress that the technology has brought us. You can do things like take digital detox time off. You could take your family on a weekend or a long weekend or a vacation where no cell phones used. You wouldn't believe how beneficial that can be to just reset your nervous system. And I mean, they're doing that with children who are addicted to technology today, but for anybody else, it's also very helpful. Maybe everybody should just do that on the weekends. Rediscover other meaningful activities. And I would say that because it is so addicting and draws us in, that it's important to look at what might be missing in your own life that makes such that you want to go online and see what others are doing. Really, let's look at our own lives. We only have so many years on this planet, right? So what do we want to do? What do we want to create? What kind of an experience do we want to have here? What's the fullness of that experience that you want? And then develop a plan to go, an action plan, a bucket list, whatever. And if peace and quiet and harmony is one of your priorities that you want to have in your life on this journey, well, then you can do things like meditate or take quiet relaxation time, foster the peace, pursue low stim but still enjoyable activities, hobbies, time with people in nature. We have to design our lives like never before. We never had to really design our lives because we were guided by that connection with the bigger whole, and the opportunities would present themselves with our intention, and they would think good things would happen and life would happen and your experiences would mount and grow, and your life went on. Well, now it's like we need to sort of strategically think about our life and create it and stick to the plan, and we can do it. We can do it. You can choose to use your senses instead of just being stimulated by a machine. You can choose to sing, to play music, to paint, to work with textures, to go look at art in a museum, to travel, to learn history. We can open up to using our senses to an incredible life with intention, but we have to strategize and decide what it is that we want. So these conversations should be had in families and schools and communities. More and more of these kinds of conversations have at the national level. We need at the national level. We also need to have these conversations. And what kind of society we want. Clearly, that conversation needs to be had too.
Yeah, we have a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you, Camilla, so much for being on the show today.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Great to be able to chat with you today. And if people want to learn more, they can go to, I have two different websites. One is called Manhattan Neighbors for Safer Telecommunications. That's manhattanneighbors.org. or my original website, electromagnetichealth.org. And then there's the Facebook group, Campaign for Radiation-Free Schools. And feel free to join that group and post questions. And, there's a great community there that can support parents, teachers, and schools and students concerned about the extent of radiation in our children's lives.
Wonderful. Well, great. Thanks again for coming on.
You're very welcome. Thank you.